Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today I'm talking about a subject very close to my heart: trash. So everyone who is anyone is talking about the most exciting event in the history of book events coming up in August, Garb August. Hopefully you've seen my announcement video already, along with announcement videos from various others of the hosts. So it is going to be an enormously enjoyable event. If you haven't seen any of those announcement videos, it's about reading trash books in August. We do have theme weeks, but I'll put in a link to my announcement video, which has got all of the details in, along with details of who the co-hosts are. Now, two of those co-hosts, Michael K. Vaughan and Steve Donahue, have already done their own videos on the question of what is trash. And I have decided to throw my hat into the ring as well. I did think about doing one at the same time that they did theirs, but I thought I would wait until we'd fully announced the event and then do this as kind of a follow-up video to that announcement. And it's a really difficult question to answer, as you might expect. Trash is not a genre or a subgenre. It's more of a type of book. So it's a classification of book rather than a genre. So it 100% crosses, cuts across all genres. There is romantic trash, there is crime trash, there is horror trash, there is non-fiction trash. There's all sorts of different trash out there, and it's much more about I think it's more about the reason why the book was created in the first place than necessarily the book itself, if that makes sense. So I think the motivation for the author and publisher in creating the book is a really important part of what defines trash, for me anyway. And I would say as well, it's an enormously subjective thing. So we've had some very interesting discussions in the Voxer group we've got set up with the different hosts for Garb August about what is and isn't trash. And one of the key questions that Steve in particular asked early on was, are all trash books bad? So just because a book is trash doesn't mean it's a bad book. Is it objectively a bad book? And I quite passionately believe that the answer to that question is no. I think trash books can be good books, but they sometimes hide that goodness, they sometimes hide that quality beneath the trashy exterior of their covers and the way they came into the world in the first place. So I think the really simple answer to the question of what is trash is that there is no simple answer. That doesn't help much, does it? I think that there are many books where you could have a bit of a debate, as we have done in our Voxer group. You could have a bit of a debate about whether the book is trash or not. I think there are some books that most people would immediately recognise as trash, but I think there are others where it's much more complex. So I think there are no clearly definable rules that you could write down to say, if this book meets these criteria, it is trash. I do not think it's possible to do that and be 100% accurate with it. I think what you can do, and what I have done and will share with you wonderful people, is come up with a list of indicators of trashiness. So I've got a long list which I'm going to go through in a little while that gives you an indicator as to whether a book might be trash. But I think you actually need to examine the book yourself to decide if it's trash or not. And to give you an analogy as to why I think it can be difficult to define trash, but at the same time be quite easy to recognise trash, I want to give you a food analogy. And what I mean by that is, as I say, I don't think you can write down a list of rules and say that define what is a trash book, but I think if you've got a trash book in front of you, you'd probably know it. So I think the analogy I would use is food, and particularly fast food. So if you think of like junk food, you kind of know junk food when you see it. So if you see a McDonald's burger, you know that is junk. And that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. So it might be objectively bad in terms of like nutritional value and things like that. but equally you could, as an eater, get pleasure from it. So I know that McDonald's is crap, but I do quite enjoy a Big Mac every so often. Yeah, but equally, if you were to try and write down what a Big Mac is, you would, I think, come up with a list of things that you could also use to define a much more high quality burger that you wouldn't necessarily call trash. So, there are many, posh burger joints nowadays that are much more upmarket than McDonald's. And essentially, when you look at it, they're selling essentially the same thing. But equally, if you put the two things next to each other, you'd very easily be able to tell the difference. Even though if you made a list of the things that are in it, a bun, a meat patty, some relish, some salad, a bit of cheese maybe, that list would be the same for both, but there's a clear difference between them. So I think the same is true for trash. So let me show you some examples, first off, of books that I think we can all agree are trash. Okay, so I've got some books on the desk in front of me here, and I would say these are definitely all trash. So the first one, Nick Carter, The Judas Spy. So look at that cover. That is definitely a trash cover. And I'll read you a bit of the blurb on the back. Mr. Judas, a master spy for hire by anyone. His time... this time by Red China, a man of incredible cruelty and savagery, torturing people at whim, killing them for sport. Nick Carter, America's top operative, the dreaded Agent N3, tougher, faster, deadlier than any man, except perhaps Mr. Judas, his oldest enemy. So that, I think, we can all agree that's trash. It's got a lot of the elements that I would use to define trash, and when we look at my list in a minute, you'll see. So firstly, it's got a very salacious cover. So it's got a cover that is like a lowest common denominator type cover. So just as junk food sucks us in by having lots of easy calories and lots of easy saturated fats, which our bodies sometimes crave, our bodies also sometimes crave trashy books, like this. So it's got that. It's also got a promise of sex and violence. So it talks about on the back Mr. Judas, torturing people at whim. So there is a promise in here of some horrible titillating stuff for the reader. There is also this reference to Red China. So I think one of the other defining elements of trash is that it often hooks into public fears and concerns. So at the time this book came out, the idea of Red China as a big threat, communist, the force of communist China, was definitely something that was in the public consciousness. So this was published in 1970 or thereabouts. So I think that's definitely something that people would have been very aware of then. So this is again something that draws the reader in with that promise of providing, almost like providing information about something that they are frightened about. So yeah, it's that idea that it kind of makes a complex and frightening situation simple and digestible. So I think that's definitely something that trash does. Okay, I've got another example here. So this is quite a well-known book. It is Coffee, Tea or Me, The Uninhabited Memoirs of Two Airline Stewardesses. So this was a big deal, this book, when it first came out, which I think was in the late 60s. And there are at least, I don't know how many sequels there are, but there were definitely sequels to it as well. So it is a no holds barred story about stewardesses. I'm guessing, I haven't read it yet, I'm guessing spending amorous time with pilots and things like that, and probably drinking lots of martinis and that kind of thing. So this nowadays is published, and you can see from the cover it's got that kind of retro kitsch thing going on, but at the time it was like a bit of a swiggy 60s thing, I suspect. So I think definitely trash. Here's another one. A Harlequin romance, so Chain of Love by Anne Stewart, and just look at that cover. I mean, that's just amazing, isn't it? The knitwear and the moustache really make that. So I'll read you the blurb of this one as well. So I think this does something similar to the Nick Carter book. So let me read you the blurb of this. They were linked together by a chain of love. Kathy Whiteheart was a battered woman on the run when she met Sinclair MacDonald. She had been trying to forget the past, to swear off men, and to avoid the kind of hurt that remains after the physical scars are gone. On a pleasure trip to the Caribbean, Sinclair turned Kathy's pain into an ache, a longing for the kind of real love she had always dreamed of. Sin MacDonald could never reveal the true reason for his interest in Kathy. He could only hope that his feelings for her would not get in the way of the secret he could never share. So I think that reference to domestic abuse is really interesting, and I think it does that, the same thing that Nick Carter does. With its reference to Red China, is that making something complex and troubling and really difficult simple. So allowing people to confront that in a simple, digestible way, I think is a really important thing that trash does. And it may be, and indeed, it is exploitative. It is exploiting people's fears and concerns in order to sell books. But I think it's a two-way relationship. So I think readers, kind of go into it subconsciously knowing that, and they do get something out of it. There is a benefit for the reader as well in being able to confront their concerns in an easy way. And let's face it, this is a Harlequin romance. They churn these things out by the bucket load. So the readers may well be reading this kind of thing again and again and again. And with that repetition comes, a kind of catharsis. Okay, let's find another one. Oh, this is a good one. Omen 4, Armageddon 2000 by Gordon McGill. So you will be aware that there are 3 films in the Omen series. There are 6 books in the Omen book series. So they didn't stop at book 3. They carried on churning out Omen books after they'd finished doing the novelisations of the movies. So this one, so you've got, Satanism as a public concern, so something that was stoked in some ways by the original Omen films and then continued. But then you've also got the impending threat of the doomsday that would be the year 2000. So you've got that thrown into the mix as well with this one. So this was published in 1983, so some way off from Y2K and all the concerns about that. But clearly that was, people were worried about the year 2000 and, would it mean something terrible happened? So this book, definitely pulls on that public concern. So I'm going to take a really quick break here, and then when we come back, I'm going to go through my list of indicators, of trash indicators. And I think if you go through this list and you get a number of ticks, then there's a very good chance that the book you are looking at is trash. So I'm going to go through the list in a moment, but first, let me just tell you the one defining thing that I think makes trash trash. And I talked at the start of the video about it being about the reason why the book exists in the first place. And I think that is a really important part of it. And for me, that defining thing is that the book exists purely to make money for the publisher. Now that may sound like a dumb thing to say, because any book is published in order to make money for the publisher. But what I mean with trash is that this is something that has no value other than as a piece of throwaway entertainment for the reader, and a way to make money for the publisher. And in particular, that is something that taps into a particular trend, or something that is popular at that moment in time, that the publishers have noticed and they want to cash in on. So I think that's why trash books so often have a real feeling of kitsch about them, like Coffee, Tea or Me, or indeed even this Harlequin Romance with its wonderfully kind of cheesy early 80s cover, is because trash books are very much of their time. So let me show you another couple I've got back here. So I've got, apologies for not being better prepared. So I've got this one, which arrived the other day. So Guardian Angels by Mick Norman, which is like a biker novel. So this came out in the 70s when there was a real wave of fear about, the Hells Angels and things like that. And I've also got, in a very similar vein, Skinhead by Richard Allen, which was also, I think, late 70s. Oh no, early 70s, so published 1970. And again, tapped into the fascination in England with like skinhead culture because of both because there was an appeal of skinhead culture to like young disaffected white men, but also because there was a fear of skinhead culture from many other parts of society. And I think, books like this exist mainly to tap into that fascination and that fear rather than because they have literary merit. So for me, that's a really important part of what makes trash, is that the publishers have identified some want in the public, some desire in the public for a certain kind of book, and they're churning books out to meet that. And that's why you often get books like this one, The Survivalist number 19, that are, part of a long series. Because as soon as publishers get their claws into something that's going to make them money in the trash market, they just keep on churning it out until people stop buying it. So that's my kind of, my central definition of trash is that one. But anyway, let me go through this list now. And you will see that I think some of these things tap into that central definition. So the first thing I've got on my list is, was it written by a celebrity? So, that's a really important one because celebrity nowadays more than ever probably is a very fleeting thing. And celebrities and publishers often try to cash in on a celebrity's fame as quickly as they can by getting them to publish a book. Next one, does it feature killer animals? So that's kind of a fun one, but clearly in the 70s and 80s there were a huge number of trashy books written about killer animals. Next one, is it a novelisation of a film or TV show? So again, it's cashing in on that demand that's already there. There's demand that the film was created, so let's get a book out and make some money off the back of it. Similarly, is it based on a video game? So there are loads of video game books that are popular nowadays as video games become more popular, and it also as video games become more complex narratively. There has become a demand for books about them, and video games take ages to make nowadays and have huge budgets. Take years and years and years to develop. So if there is a way that the owners of the rights for the video game can cash in by getting one writer rather than a huge team of developers to get a book with that video game's name on the cover and get it out there to people, then clearly they're going to do that. We've also got, so is it a tie-in to a film or TV show, but not a direct adaptation? So like, I've now lost it amongst the pile of trash on my desk. So like this Omen book, so not directly related to a particular film, but rather a continuation of the series, because the publishers could see there was still money in it. Okay, moving on. Is it part of a really long series? So as I've said, publishers will try and just keep on flogging that cash cow until it dies. Next one, is it credited to more than one author? So clearly there are many books that are not trash, that have more than one author. But also, I think there are quite a lot of trashy books where there is more than one author, either because one of the authors is a celebrity, or because it's something like Coffee, Tea or Me, which was written by was supposedly written by a couple of stewardesses, but actually written by this guy, Donald Bain, who I think did the actual writing of it after interviewing them, but it was originally published as being by the two stewardesses. Next question, and this is shows my biases, shall we say, but the next question is one of the authors James Patterson? So I firmly believe that all of the James Patterson and books are trash. But I don't think they're good trash. I think they're really bad trash. I really don't like them much at all. So apologies to any James Patterson fans out there. Next one, fairly self-explanatory. Does the title end with an exclamation mark? I think having lots of exclamation marks, either in the title or in the book itself, is definitely something that trash has as a characteristic. Next one. So this is a bit of a catch-all one, but would you be ashamed to read it on public transport? So I'm not ashamed to read things like The Survivalist on public transport. I might think twice, given the fact that, and I haven't read it yet, but given the fact that it is, I think, quite racist in parts, I would probably be cautious about reading Skinhead on public transport. I probably wouldn't read this book. I don't know if it's Jalav. I think it's Jalav, Amazon Warrior. So I might not read that on public transport. Next one. So this was a bit of a controversial one in the Voxer group. Is it about vampires? So clearly there are a number of fantastic books about vampires, which are not trash at all. But also there are tons of really long-running, very trashy vampire series. There's a series on Kindle, and I now cannot remember the name of it, but it's a vampire series, and no word of a lie, there's, I think, about 150 books in the series. So they just churn them out every month. They're ostensibly written by one author, but in reality I suspect that's just a house name, and there's a bunch of different people writing them. I did read the first one, which was hugely entertaining. The vampire in that book has a submarine and like a secret underwater base, which I thought was just brilliant. But yeah, there's like 150 plus books in that series. Next one, does the blurb feature the phrase one-man army? So I don't think this survivalist book does actually feature the phrase on the back of it, but it's definitely got that one-man army vibe to it. Okay, next one, is there a character on the cover holding more than one gun? So I think one gun is kind of okay. You get lots of thrillers and things like that where the character's got one gun. If they're holding more than one gun, I think that's definitely an indicator that the book might be trash. Next one, does the blurb feature the word steamy? So I've got a Jackie Collins book in front of me here somewhere, The Stud. I don't think this does have the word steamy on the back, but it's got, it's definitely got the vibe. I'm sure the word steamy is included within the book, if not on the blurb. Okay, next one, is it set in Hollywood? So I'm sure there are many good books set in Hollywood. So something like LA Confidential by James Patterson would be an example of that. But I also think it's something that, because of its glitz and glamour and things like that, is often used as a lazy setting for books. And therefore, definitely an indicator of trashiness. Next one, does it cash in on a public fear or a moral panic? So I've talked about that. I think that's a really strong indicator of trash. Okay, so next one, does the cover feature full or partial nudity? So I'll show this rather fetching Nick Carter cover again as an illustration for that one. Next one, is it a shifter romance? So I've been trawling the bowels of Amazon, and there are a huge number of these shifter romance books. Very few of them available in paperback, most of them just on Kindle, probably because people would be ashamed to be seen reading them on the bus. But it does seem to be a huge subgenre, and I'm fairly convinced that they're all trashy. I have bought one on my Kindle, which is about a woman who falls in love with a guy who changes into a dragon, so I will be reading that one soon. Does it feature demonic or killer children? So killer children, definitely a trash thing. Does it have a step back cover? I'm going to have to lean behind me and get a V.C. Andrews book to illustrate the joys of the step back cover. So look at this. This is a really good one. So look, nice face there, but then when you open it up, there's a murder happening in the background. Step back covers are definitely a strong indicator of trash. Next one, is it set in a hospital? So it seems to me that hospital settings are common for trashy books, be they kind of horror novels and things like that, or romances. Is there gratuitous sex or violence? So that, as I said earlier on in my Big Mac analogy, you know, sex and violence are the saturated fat and high sugar and salt content equivalent for books. I think, you know, books that sell themselves on the promise of sex or violence are probably trash. Now, obviously, you can have books that feature lots of sex and violence, which aren't trash. You know, there are many classics that, you know, that talk about sex a lot or that talk about violence. You know, Stephen King is an author we discussed in our Voxer group, and there were a couple of dissenting voices who questioned whether Stephen King was trash. I think the majority of us felt that he wasn't, but clearly there's a lot of violence in Stephen King books. But it is not the sole purpose of the books. Whereas I think in trashy books, they sell themselves on the promise of sex and violence, and the plot and characters are really just a way to get from one scene of sex or violence to the next. Next one then, has the author gone to a good deal of effort to hide their authorship? So you do see that a lot with books. So Nick Carter is not the name of the author of these books. He's the name of the central character. Nick Carter, you know, the name of the author doesn't appear on this book at all. And similarly, you know, you get many books that are written under pseudonyms or house names where, you know, the publishing house has a name they put on the cover of the book and they just, you know, pay jobbing writers to write the books. So, you know, pseudonymity in authorship is definitely a feature of trash. And there are many respected authors who've published trash novels under pseudonyms. So Michael McDowell, who I've talked about on the channel before, who wrote the Blackwater Saga as well as many other fantastic horror books, also wrote some of the books in the Black Beret kind of men's adventure series under a pseudonym. Right, next one. Does it have a cigarette ad in it? Oh, I should have prepared a book for this. I've definitely got a book somewhere that has a cigarette ad in it. Oh, what's this one? Yes, so this Executioner book, Washington IOU, if you open it up, it has inside it an advert for Kent cigarettes. So having a cigarette ad inside a book is definitely an indicator of trash. What could tell you more clearly that all the publisher wants is money than them putting an advert inside the book for something that will literally kill their readers? Now, what greater indicator of trashiness and unscrupulousness from the publisher could you wish for? Next one, has it got taming or claiming or taking or a similar word usage in the title? So that's one I think, you know, particularly true for kind of romances and erotic romances. So yeah, playing into that sex and violence kind of thing again. Next one, so tying back to that movie novelisation one earlier on, has the author also written movie novelisations? So are they the kind of author who just churns out movie novelisations but has tried their hand at something original as well? That can definitely be an indicator of trashiness. And the final one I've got on here is the subgenre weirdly specific? So I mentioned earlier on that I'd got this shifter romance about a dragon. So I think shifter romance, so dragon shifter romance is probably, you know, fairly specific. This book also advertises itself as being a baby billionaire shifter romance. So there are a huge number, it seems to me, of romance books about billionaires, and also romance books that are specifically about impregnation, basically. So this is a book about a billionaire man who turns into a dragon trying to impregnate the heroine. And that is all very much laid out on the front cover of the book. So 100% weirdly specific. So yeah, I will put this list in the description for the video, as I said, and I've put little scores against each one. And I reckon if you score more than a 5, so some things only count for 1 point, some things count for more than that. I think if you score more than a 5, you are definitely highly likely to be looking at a trash book. So hopefully that has been a helpful and entertaining delve into the world of trash a bit. I've certainly quite enjoyed it, and I've got some wonderful books in front of me. Although I have to say, I received in the post today two job lots of books that I bought off eBay. One which was like 20 plus romance books, and one which was a load of old science fiction books, which had a few kind of trashy ones in there. And my office now stinks. It's got that musty smell of old paperbacks that haven't really been looked after, which I kind of like, but also don't like. So I might have to open a window. I might have to open a window in a minute and get rid of the stench. So yes. Anyway, that was a bit of a delve into the world of trash. Hope you enjoyed it. There will be more Garb August content coming in the run up to August, so do look out for that. Let me know in the comments what you think of trash. What trash books do you like? What do you think are defining characteristics of trash? And if you've got any questions at any point, just shout. I'm keen for as many people as possible to get into the wonderful world of trash in August. I'm really looking forward to it. So as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well. Hope you are reading trashy stuff, and I will speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.